constructive. Let's leave aside the above arguments about robust economic interaction and the fact that cultural integration is already well underway, with roughly 1/9 to 1/6 of U.S. citizens, it depends who is doing the math, identifying themselves as having roots in Mexico. Let's ignore all the economic arguments about how Mexican immigrants, legal or otherwise, do jobs that Americans don't want, limit inflation, and serve very real and positive roles in the American labor market. Let's ignore the moral and legal implications of expunging the United States' illegal communities. Let's focus on the border itself. I've already said that Mexico, even in the best of times, cannot secure the border. Well, neither can the United States. The U.S.-Mexico border is roughly 2,000 miles long. 2,000 miles sounds like a significant distance. It isn't significant. It's massive. That is double the length of the European Cold War border, a border that could only be sealed by turning the broader region into a national security zone under military rule. There has also been no small amount of talk of being tougher on immigration. This ignores basic human nature. The U.S. government is far more capable than Mexico's. Somewhat ironically, the American capacity to deport large volumes of people is part of the structural and organizational strength that so draws immigrants. Although I think it is obvious that the specific act of deportation isn't something that would-be immigrants are all that fond of. Even stronger illegal migration penalties would not have much of an impact. Mexicans and Central Americans are fleeing not just poverty, but also the insecurity of the drug war and various Central American juntas. So unless U.S. policy is going to be to shoot people on sight in the border zone, the Departments of Immigration and Homeland Security just aren't capable of counter-intimidation of anything like the environments the would-be immigrants are running from. So if the border cannot be sealed, if the allure of the United States cannot be dampened, and if policy failures in Mexico will only enhance integration, the United States is simply stuck with a large illegal Mexican and Central American community. Considering the lack of viable options in American public discourse, what does the presence of 8.5 million illegal Hispanic immigrants mean? Most have probably heard about the horrors of the Mexican drug wars, where kidnappings, assassinations, mass murders, public body dumpings, and beheadings are regrettably all too common. What is less understood is the link between illegal narcotics and illegal immigration. Because illegal immigrants are undocumented, they have difficulty gaining access to the basic pieces of modern society, including identification such as driver's licenses and financial access such as bank accounts. That has a far more damning impact than it may seem at first blush. With limited access to the banking system, illegals operate in the cash economy. They are far more likely to have significant quantities of cash on their person or in their home at any given time. Since illegals fear being discovered and deported, they often do not contact law enforcement when such inevitable attacks happen. In the modern age of credit cards and PayPal, that makes illegals a far more lucrative target for robbers and muggers than even rich Caucasians. There is a term for areas where people who live outside of normal social support networks exist: ghettos. Unique among American immigrant communities, Mexican and Central American illegals live in ghettos. This would be a serious social problem in need of addressing under any circumstance, but new circumstances have pushed it from the serious to the critical. The drug war of 2014 is considerably different from the drug war of the 20th century. Moving products is cheaper by water, regardless of whether the product is legal or not. As such, most interstate trade in illegal narcotics, just like interstate trade in any other product, originally traveled by water. In the United States, this made the port city of Miami the premier entry point for illegal narcotics. Small fleets of vessels would swarm from Colombia and Venezuela to Miami, and from there the drugs would percolate throughout the country. The 1980s hit TV show Miami Vice wasn't just a gripping drama, but was a little bit of geopolitics distilled into televised form. As a maritime power, however, maritime interception is something that the Americans are very good at. Once the Americans figured out what to look for, they were able to improve everything from port security to Coast Guard patrols, sharply limiting maritime and airborne shipments first into Miami, then all of Florida, and in time all coastal approaches. By the year 2000, maritime smuggling routes may not have been severed, but they had become so fraught with danger that they were no longer viable methods for transporting the bulk of the illicit narcotics the Americans so craved. As of 2014, Miami is still a major point of entry for South American cocaine. Most of it comes through Venezuela and up the Lesser Antilles chains to the Dominican Republic and Haiti before making the jump to Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory. But strong American and Cuban patrols, drug interdiction cooperation between the United States and Cuba is perhaps the highlight of the two countries' relations, prevent this flow from being more than small volumes smuggled in the holds of larger vessels or pleasure craft. resulting in much higher overhead costs and much lower volumes per shipment. This route is a faint shadow of what it used to be in its Miami Vice heyday. Long gone are the days where small vessels packed to the gills with cocaine could simply sail into Miami Harbor or land in or near the Everglades. Plenty of South American drugs are still shipped by water and air toward the United States, just not all the way to the United States. Most make landfall in Central America or southern Mexico before joining the cartel's landbound supply chains. But one of the quirks of narcotic economics is that the addicts at the point of sale are not particularly price sensitive. The American success at blocking maritime and air routes forced the drug flows into more expensive land routes. The sonar and low elevation radar that proved so effective at monitoring featureless water and keeping illicit shipments away from American shores proved largely useless at sealing the 2,000-mile-long U.S.-Mexican border. And so the drug flow shifted from Miami Vice to something else. One of the many reasons that water transport is so much cheaper is that it is so much less complicated. There are no middlemen in the ocean, no towns to navigate, no regulatory agencies that make their homes on the waves. You leave port, you sail, you can sail around anything you don't like the look of, you enter port, and that is it. On land, there are physical borders to cross. You must follow existing infrastructure. You must deal with local regulations, customs, and law enforcement at a plethora of stops along the way. But all this adds more than simply cost. It also ensures that the shippers become intimately involved in every aspect of their transport routes. And should shippers using two different routes find themselves operating at the same bottleneck, say a mountain valley where their routes merge or an international border crossing, competition erupts. In the case of Mexico and drugs, these features generate two results. First, they drive up the cost of the cocaine that ultimately reaches the United States. While drug smugglers aren't exactly sticklers for filing statistical data, the Department of Justice estimates that the Mexican land portion of the cocaine smuggling routes adds about $10,000 to the cost of a kilo of cocaine, about $10 a gram, as compared to 1980s seaborne routes. That is a lot of money being used to employ, corrupt, bribe, and or heavily arm a great many people across the length and breadth of Mexico's many smuggling byways. The landbound nature of the smuggling routes introduces so many increases to the price of cocaine that it is all but inevitable that large, well-funded organizations will arise from the trade. Best guess is that the Mexican portion of the drug supply chain has an annual turnover in excess of $60 billion, roughly 4 to 5% of Mexico's legal GDP. For comparison, the U.S. automotive industry comprises about 1.2% of U.S. GDP. The total sales of Walmart, America's largest corporation, are about 2.5%. Second, it also guarantees that these well-connected, well-funded organizations have a lot to fight over. We know that competition as the Mexican drug war or the cartel wars. It pits the various cartels against one another, battling for control of key nodes throughout northern and southern Mexico, up to and including the major border crossings to the United States.